Well, hello there. It is time for Star Wars Episode 6 Return of the Jedi 9M6 10M1 Heroic Ewok. Music by John Williams, orchestrated by Herb Spencer. Here we go. I'm going to dive straight in. It's quite short, this one, but the whole sequence from start to end is about 10 minutes and 10 and a half minutes, basically. So we start with an E-based pedal, really, and this simple motive. Like that, which briefly sort of does a E half dim without the third. And then it modulates down to an E flat. And then we get this type of shape, a 3-3-0-8-11. It's an alpha chord or part of an alpha chord. Like that, because it's a major minor, essentially. B major minor, but with the E flat in the bass, and a typical jazz hand position, basically. Then we've got a B flat augmented, which then modulates to this chord here, this one. So we've got G, D flat, E flat, another G, A, D sharp, F sharp. And that is an octatonic subset, basically. It's 5/28, but if you want to think of it as a sort of D sharp half dim over G, it can be found with a mix of G dim or G diminished seventh with an F sharp diminished seventh as well. I need to write the 7 in there. So, for example, if you do that, then it will give you all of those notes, basically. You can sort of pick them out. And then that sort of continues to an F sharp octatonic scale, so an octatonic scale starting on F sharp, almost in exact scalic position as well, in fact, in this particular bit. So again, using octatonicism, just not massively, we haven't really heard too much of it recently in the film, so quite interesting. Then it modulates again from that sort of F sharp, now a sort of semitonally to down to F natural, and then we're suddenly into C. So a complete phrase modulation here. There's no attempt to kind of do much of it. I think simply just cancelling out the F sharp. So we go into this one, which is another sort of chord complex. So if I do that, you can kind of hear that it's sort of G harmonic minor. But with the C, so it's kind of pan-diatonic at that point because it's got that C pedal, and also there's an A there, so it has a sort of weird illusion of that. It's sort of quite jazz actually as well, and that sort of continues with very high bassoon. Very high bassoon and a piccolo as well, quite low actually for piccolo, I guess. Still on the stave, and then we've got horns like that as well against the F sharp. Then we're into the Ewoks theme, bum ba-dum bum ba-dum bum ba-da-dee-dee-dee dum bum ba-dum bum ba-dum bum ba-da-bum, that one. And it's a sort of D flat based thing, but basically there are lots and lots of sort of rubbing notes. So it's sort of not quite right, basically. It's sort of lots of rubs. So we got that going, and then it goes into a sort of C major with almost like a sort of blues third as well, sort of. And that sort of continues, and notice that you've got block chordal bits, like that, all in major chords. And then we got this sort of sharpened fourth pretty much through most of it. And then it continues. Where you got the sort of G over C with the pedal going on through. And notice that it's kind of second inversion, and then it actually hits that root note sort of a bit later in the bar, which is a typical Williams device. Then we're into C major 7 with a sharp 5. And just a little careful bit of orchestration here. If you sort of hone in on here, we've got the horns quite high on that sounding B. Notice how the trumpets come in on that bom, ba-dum, on the B itself. And notice how the horns are then brought down just so that it's a little bit of space so it doesn't overlap, because of course it would then overlap with the do that. It'd just sound like a wrong note. So of course the inversion has to be made. So at this point we're in a sort of E Phrygian Dominant, and then a sort of an E Lydian flat 6. All sorts of weird things. I mean, basically just sort of a mixed mode, I think, is the easiest thing to describe it as. With all this sort of little filigree going up over the top in the wind, lots and lots of wind. I haven't done all the sort of doublings there particularly. And then we're in a little transition bar with these trombones, lots of sort of glisses going on. And then E again, mixed mode, catch-all for a sort of synthetic scale. And there's a slight discrepancy over the actual notes, because it should be bum, ba-dum, but sometimes it's written like that, and I'm not sure which one is correct because it seems to be completely inconsistent, and I don't know whether that's because of miscopying or whether it wasn't really picked up in the session or there wasn't time to change it. And also it's so imperceptible as to be completely unnoticeable except by cloth ears like me. And then we got more block chords going into a sort of B Phrygian type of thing. That sort of thing. And then we're suddenly into dyads. And that callback here in the horns is a sort of callback sort of to there. Kind of. A bit tenuous, really. And then it's just imitated in the flute, clarinet and bassoon in that 3 octave layers, but sort of 2 octaves apart, if you see what I mean. Octave 1, octave 2, octave 3, but the distance is 2 octaves. So yeah, then violin 1 on this note, G, and then dyads. Like that, and then it ends. And then I think 3 seconds later, we're suddenly into the next cue, and that's kind of it. So short and sweet for this one, but again, lots of interesting little devices, especially this. Look at all that intricate cello double bass writing as well. Really interesting. So let's have a quick hone in on that. So that is at bar 23, and then I need to open bar 23, basically. So let's go into that as I open the file. Here we go. Yeah, so this is it. If I kind of hone in, I'm just going to get rid of all of these extra staves that don't divide, because it's annoying. So let's hone in on just make it a little bit bigger just to kind of see what's going on. There we go. Yeah. That's what's happening. It's really weird. It's a sort of very intricate sort of thing. Whoops, that's an interesting thing. And it sort of basically sort of covers that as well. It's just really interesting orchestration. And these are just sort of plodding, detached crotchets. Let's add the next layer. Typical, that sort of semi-quaver 16th notes type sort of thing is so typical of Williams. Let's do it without the bass now with the cello. And now with the basses. And I love the rhythmic interplay as well, because of course here the eighth notes are sort of continuing what the cellos could have perhaps done if they had 8 arms, but they don't. And of course they're divided there anyway. So a sort of 7th and then an octave. So it's an interesting one, and then that kind of pattern continues pretty much all the way through that whole section. And then when they don't have those sort of crotchets, then they've got this. Like that. And then putting it all together, just at that bit. Can't really see it properly, but here we go. And this is another thing in terms of sort of writing. I put the bass, I should have written bass clef there, but you can kind of see what's going on. Notice how they kind of don't quite go out of range, because of course if we did that, that's what would happen, and then disaster. And then of course that's the lowest note that we can achieve on the piccolo. But here they don't jump up there, they jump up there because of the break, I think, is here because of a break point. So interesting how that's arranged, which is always good to look at winds, I think. But yeah, basically just stay in the correct range. There you go, done. So yeah, and then we've got sort of double piccolo a little bit later on at this point. Which is really interesting. And look at all the wind. Like that. And then lots of orchestral contrast. So with this, we've got the piano and the Glock as well helping out those winds. And notice that without those driving, let's call them driving violins, it sounds a little bit static, because it kind of needs some momentum at that point. But now if we put this in, we just hone in on it. Very, very simple, just 8th notes repeated. So those are sort of doing the role of what the horns would normally do. But because we've got horns coming in melodically here, the choice is not to put them there, because otherwise they've just continued the tune. It might sound a bit strange. And you can always sort of judge that by just going, well, what happens if we put them in, you know, there? It would still probably sound okay, probably. But yes, we still have the contrast now with strings and wind. And it's possible that the horns would sort of sound even more muted as well, because the wind's there. I kind of dull them slightly. I think that's kind of all I needed to talk about. I mean, the only other thing is this bit here, right at the very beginning. I'm pretty sure there's a bassoon that joins there, but it's very difficult to tell. Both parts were actually written in, and then I think it was just decided on the day, or let's have the clarinet at that point. But that's still bassoon as well. So interesting how that kind of turns out. Anyway, that's it for the day, and I shall see you very soon. Bye for now.